I mean, I'm glad that you bring this up. I've been making a very, very conscious decision to turn off both my social media and my devices because I'm working on a book as well. And in order to find that,
It's just not the contemporary art, but also how the contemporary art can bring the heritage back and take it forward, and making sure that we're carrying our culture and putting the right eyes on it. And
the foundation was being set. It was still a very informal place. It was a handful of galleries, but it was also very convivial. It was very family like.
welcome to the podcast, Lisa. I'm very, very excited to have you.
Thank you so much, Charuka. Thank you. Thank you for reaching out as well.
Oh, this is truly a pleasure. I am truly like any Indian who would be listening right now. It's how the Bollywood craze. We not only know you as someone who's also the part of the art world, but also such a big body of work of a creative. I why don't you start? Let's go right in. And would you like to introduce yourself? How would you like to introduce yourself to everyone who's joining us right now?
Oh my goodness. I didn't even think of that. I mean, for me, I'm just a creative and of course a mother, which demands its own unique brand of creativity, you might say, and a nomad. And I like to, I think, in this phase of my life, say that I've been a wanderer for much of my life, but I think that love and service, above all, are very important for me right now.
I love that. And I really do resonate with the idea of feeling creative and identifying. I think I really want to start a little bit from the beginning, since you have so many feathers on your cap and so many different roles, even as a creative, that you've not only played but also aced, from being an actor, writer, um, you know, being a model, winning so many pageants. How do you express your journey and look at it from where you stand right now? Looking back, did you ever feel that you'd be able to play so many roles as an artist, as a creative wholesome?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I actually have been reflecting quite a bit at this phase of my life on what it all means. Looking into the rearview mirror and trying to sort of discern whether there's been a very clear path. And the best that I can say is no, there hasn't been. I think a lot of my creative life, both professionally and personally, and I have to say that there is a difference between the two, um, have happened really serendipitously and accidentally. But I think I have to credit probably the era that I started in with, infusing me with a certain um, bravery, sometimes recklessness. So essentially, it was really the early 90s when I was still quite 16 or 17 when I landed up in India serendipitously. And of course, I don't want to get into that entire story because we'll go off on a tangent. And I have written a book about it called Close to the Bone. Um, but I never imagined myself to be a part of a particularly entertainment business because by nature, you might say I am more of an introvert. I am an observer of the world, as I think a lot of artists have to be, a lot of creatives have to be. I would much prefer to stand in a corner and watch rather than be the center.
Mm. Behind the camera rather than in front of the camera.
No, no, take the camera out of it entirely. I mean, I never wanted to be a part of the entertainment business. As I said, it literally happened accidentally. And, I do give it obviously a lot of credit for opening a particular path that I wouldn't have imagined as a young girl. But opening up this playground of possibilities because I never wanted to be an actor, but I definitely was interested in self expression. And this is again where I was talking about when you talk about the creative self, there's sort of maybe the professional aspect, but there's the personal aspect. Professionally, fortunately or unfortunately, people still associate me with being in front of the camera. But on a personal level, I've been writing for a long time. I always imagined to be a writer. Um, I started collecting contemporary Indian art when I was 17 years old in Mumbai. So I was fortunate enough to
And that too, it's in the 90s.
that was in the 90s. I was fortunate enough to attend Harsh Goenka's art camps back in the day in Mumbai, and I was able to pick up, some incredible masters at, you might say bargain, though I wasn't, yeah, I wasn't, picking it up with a marketplace mindset. I was simply picking up art that resonated with me and that told a story that also marked a particular period of my life. So you might say that I have been a collector of art, an informal collector of Indian art for a long, long, long and I've always been art adjacent, no matter where we've lived. And since I left Mumbai in around 2002, I've lived all over Europe, and I lived in the States, and then we came back to Mumbai, and we've been in Asia, my family and I. We've lived in Hong Kong, Singapore, now Dubai, back to Mumbai. Mumbai is always going to be the heart center of my life. India is home. Uh, But, also I think that Dubai is a very exciting, merging center, for both arts and culture right now. So I'm really happy to be based and technology. Yeah, many different possibilities. I see it as kind of the bridge to the future. But there also is a bridge to India from Dubai, so I feel very, very happy and comfortable here.
That, yeah, it still feels like pretty close to home for sure.
Well, it's also very conveniently located from, the point of view as well.
I want to ask you something. You said like how 90s, you are crediting 90s as a big part in your own life and what it played and how it set it out for you. But let's talk in context to the art that you said and how you started collecting art and being interested in the art so young. Can you give me a little context, and maybe I'm just trying to look in here if there is something, how what brought you into the arts, and collecting, and particularly also interested you in um, Indian art? Did you have an environment at home growing up where you felt like you had an influence, or being in Bombay, or there was something else that you were, what was this stem that brought you in this part of the world when you were young enough?
I think, well, I mean, partially upbringing. I definitely have to credit my upbringing. My parents, or particularly my father, surrounded me with art. He's Bengali.
Oh, really?
I grew up with literature, with independent films. We never watched mainstream films; they were banned from and classical music, and all the cliches you might say. But I was always drawn towards art. It's simply who I was, and I don't think necessarily that I have a skill in expressing myself as a visual.
I was about to ask that.
I don't think that I do, though I do like watercolors. I like playing with watercolors. But yeah, and to be honest, it doesn't interest me. For sure, I think that writing is is my mode of expression, primarily, aside from other things, of course, acting, etc. But I have a greater appreciation for the visual arts, I think you could say, because I don't have any skills. And I do think that, it was a time of also great personal exploration when I came to Bombay. I was very young. And It was an exciting time, to be honest. The 90s was a time when so many of the industries that we take for granted today in India, whether it's fashion or advertising, even Bollywood, including art, the foundation was being set. It was still a very, very informal place. It was a handful of galleries, but it was also very convivial. It was very family-like. I had a couple of friends who were also very interested in art, and we would make a point of doing the rounds of the galleries, every few weeks, and you get to know gallerists and you get to meet artists. And to be honest, that was what fascinated me. I was not interested in meeting businessmen or business people. That was never in my wheelhouse. It held no appeal to me personally. So I think it was a wonderful period of exploration during that time. And in fact, at one point, I had a friend, and we decided that we were going to curate an art exhibition. Oh, I still remember we registered a company called Art Aegis and put together a wonderful exhibition. And it was a lot of work, probably 1995 or 1996. And I still have some of the clippings from it. And it was really wonderful, but imagine that, in those days you had to send invites either through the mail or personally hand delivered or else fax them. So we spent the night before faxing people with, growing kind of affection and desperation, love to see you there tomorrow, etc. Of course, we had a wonderful turnout and it was a wonderful experience. But again, I felt I mean, running a physical gallery takes a lot of stamina and a very particular kind of skill set. And I mentioned before, and I'm not exaggerating when I said that I'm an introvert. So I personally would rather spend time with artists one on one rather than networking with collectors. That's simply who I am. And therefore, as much as I had or hung on to this dream of, one day I'll open my own physical gallery, I realized where I'm sitting today, there's no appeal for a physical gallery, but a great deal of compelling evidence pointing to opening a digital platform celebrating arts from these regions. And so that's what I ended up doing.
Amazing. Tell me something. Who was the first artist that really, like, that you drooled over and was like, the artist crush that we often have? And this was not the time of social media. Now it's become so fast and furious that every second we like,
I miss
it's
those
like,
days. I miss those days, really.
I've started asking this question on the podcast now. What is the last artist that you loved on social media? It's so hard that people don't remember.
Yes, I know. We're all saturated and it's really unfortunate. And, I mean, I'm glad that you bring this up. I've been making a very, very conscious decision to turn off both my social media and my devices because I'm working on a book as well. And in order to find that, I mean, as it is a tremendous amount of discipline and focus, it's just too easy to turn on your phone and start scrolling. Um, and also, the way that we encounter the world and experience the world is so vastly different. And I think I saw a meme that was quite funny, and somebody had posted, I think, a photograph of themselves. They were back in the 70s when they were a child, and they were riding the tricycle, and they said, I fell off my tricycle in 1978, and because there was no social media to report it, I'm reporting it now. And it was obviously a dig at the current state of affairs of influencers and the way that we're expected to lead our lives and literally report each and every small little detail, which I'm sure, years from now, there will be some sort of repercussions on our psyche.
Absolutely. I think it's happening. We can see it even now.
But anyways, going back to your question, off of my rant, uh, I think Jogen Chowdhury is an artist whose work I was very drawn to, both the simplicity of his line work and the strength of his line work. And I was naturally, I think, fascinated by this idea of what you can convey through line drawings. And I have to admit that I'm very partial to the Bengal school of artists, to the artists who came out of Shantiniketan, to some of the artists that chronicled a lot of the difficult times that West Bengal went through, whether it was the imposed famine, etc. And I felt really the power of art again to make a very strong statement in the world, to move somebody, in a moment when you encounter it. Um, so yeah, those are the first artists that I was drawn towards, and I did buy a wonderful Jogan that I have today, Suhas Roy. I enjoyed a lot of the other artists as well, like say a Manjit Bawa. I enjoyed seeing his works, but somehow I didn't feel that those were works that I wanted to live with. So those are two very separate experiences. One is to approach a work in a gallery setting and really appreciate it and absorb it. And another are the question as a collector is what can you imagine seeing with on a daily basis and living every single day? And those are often dramatically different works, in my experience.
Tell me something. Um, Now, from so many, let's take a hold and first talk about you from being in the Bollywood, in the entertainment world, and then um, being a writer. What was that shift like? And then we'll talk about upside space and how has technology and all of that come into play. But let's also talk about your journey as a writer. And I also want to ask you something specifically when you're a creative person, there's so many ways, and I feel personally within my own self because I have so many creative avenues when it's like, I run a business which is in the arts. I'm an artist myself. I design books, publish books all throughout the day, look at so many artists' works. And I feel like every aspect has so many, just a different way of expression. Some has, some feels a lot more natural and some feels like a skill I'm acquiring over the time. But it's also always exciting the way that, we express ourselves in always new ways. Can you talk a little bit about how writing has happened for you and what has that meant for you all these years?
Well, writing didn't happen recently. Writing, I've always been writing. So then the question arises, um, do you define yourself as a writer if you are writing since the age of probably 10, but you never publish your work? Or are you only a writer if you become a published writer? And is a debate that, I'm sure would become very heated very quickly. And, this applies to any sort of creative endeavor. Are you a painter if you for yourself, or only if you display them in a gallery, right? And that leads to the upside. Well, I mean, I've been writing always, and I finally had the opportunity to publish on the basis of after I was diagnosed with cancer because suddenly I had publishers approach me to tell my story. And even though I would have preferred to start perhaps with fiction, I realized that I was going to leverage this opportunity. Finally, um, get my words out there. And actually, before that, I've written numerous articles for quite a few magazines in India, whether it's Vogue or Elle or Harper's Bazaar. I've had a column in DNA. But the interesting thing is that people again tend to dismiss it. They tend to only fixate on this one version of yourself. And I think creativity is creativity. And, I think as a creative, you don't want to necessarily label yourself. It's the world. Yeah, it's a world that insists on labeling you. I mean, as an example, I've written every single word in my book, labored over sentences, spent, I didn't sleep for an entire year because I, I was putting the finishing touches. And yet, after my book came out, There were quite a few people that actually even reached out to close friends and my husband and said, "Did she actually write this? I mean, come on." And a ghostwriter. And, on one hand, are you doing this for validation? Well, it was a big deal for me because it's also a book that's so personal and it's about back my own narrative because for so much of my life, other people were telling me who I was. And now as an artist, I'm telling you who I am. And so, that would sometimes cut. That would sometimes. But then, again, I make this, I have to drop my expectations of people as well to understand me. I have to meet them for where they are. And so, for me, the creative process is simply creative process. It was very natural. I didn't think that there was no transition. Um, there was nothing even conscious. No, no, because I can also be acting and I can be writing and I can be, working on a lot of other very deeply private creative endeavors.
But tell me something. When as an artist, when um, I remember, and I've shared about this on the podcast a couple of times, when I lost my mom in COVID, um, I can feel, no, I feel so comfortable even now, just um, when after my mom, when I started, I can feel like I'm two different versions of the artist that I am today. The one that was before, and the one that I am now. Specifically, in the first year, I did a solo show, and that was here in Agra itself, and I did an entire series of body of work, which was just on her death anniversary, which also is very close to my birthday. And it's just it's a very hard month always. And I still remember, like, I had never felt um this fear, this sense of because when we know, we're going to put ourselves out there, there will be judgment. And no matter how much I say I may not care about it, there is going to be some kind of impact, there's going to be some kind of emotion that will be induced. And since this emotion was so personal and personal, I decided to put myself out there. It was nobody else's choice. But also, I knew what I was putting out there was very vulnerable and very personal, and I didn't care for someone else's opinion. But I also knew that every pin will hurt me, or opinion, or if it, whatever way. I'm just trying to ask you, where when you were writing the book and when you published, it just wasn't any work. It was a very vulnerable part of who you are, the journey that you've been. And there are also a lot of painful moments, and moments that, you know, sometimes still will hurt. It does not matter how and when. How is, how does, because I think, I don't know how acting works, but I'm assuming, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the level of vulnerability, specifically a painful moment of your own life, when you project that and put it out in the world, that may feel a lot more, you feel like you're putting yourself out in the world for judgment.
Um, I think that, the way that I've approached acting was always very deeply personal and personalizing certain, private pains and bringing that into the work that I was doing. And the work that I'm most proud of are the films that nobody in India has seen, like Water, like The World Unseen, etc. I did a lot of independent films and I enjoyed that process. It was very cathartic, even. So I'm familiar with the process of vulnerability. You have to be vulnerable as an actor. There's no other way around it. You can't call yourself an actor otherwise. So acting, unfortunately, I think has become very twisted in India. It's tied in with celebrity dumb, which is not acting. That's a very different thing. That's the business or of. But you have to be vulnerable and you have to put a lot of yourself out there. So that's not it's not familiar. It's not unfamiliar to me. We remember that I'm also one of the first Indian personalities to talk openly about cancer. So I'm very fearless in that area. It doesn't bother me. I, in fact, feel more suffocated and discombobulated by hypocrisy or having to conceal anything. my nature is just to live very openly as possible, particularly when it comes to my personal story. When it comes to my family, that's a different story, obviously. I feel more protective there, and it's not my place to, to share our family's personal moments. But personally, I have nothing to hide. I have no problem with sharing pain and vulnerability, and I believe that pain is an essential part of life. And as an artist, if you're scared of pain, you can't produce good art. So it was cathartic, and I really welcomed being able to share who I was because I was very, very weary and tired of being labeled as this glamour figure, which I'm not. I'm simply not, and it happens until today. I'm 51 years old, and people still talk about a video that I did when I was 17 or 18. And it sounds funny, but it's actually very irritating because obviously that's not who I am. And but it's no longer who I am, regardless. So it's like I was thinking of sort of a way of explaining it, or like a metaphor, um, like something that you've done in high school. I had thought of something actually, and now I've completely forgotten it. But suppose you in your high school played jazz or something, a jazz yatra, something like that. But today you are someone very different. You're a CEO. Um, you wouldn't necessarily be identified as a jazz musician. You might even want to, but people wouldn't necessarily pin that onto you for so long. And the fact of the matter is, I've moved so far from who I was when I was younger. And even when I was younger, I was not who people thought that I was. I think that also living, after cancer, survival becomes a creative act. Everything becomes a creative. And to be honest, even before that, my life was a creative act. It was almost like performance art because there were very few others who were doing what I was doing. Imagine as a young girl coming to India in the early 90s when India was not what it is today. It was not easy. Every single day was a creative act of survival. I had to learn on my feet. And that's, like I said, it's a form of performance art that I'm also very proud of, and that, probably someone who was born, in 2000 may not understand what it was like um, to adapt to those times in India. But, it's a form of creativity. Creativity cannot be necessarily labeled or boxed. That's what I
Absolutely. And I think I truly relate to the idea that, I feel like more than my desire, I don't know if it connects or even makes sense. Re Specifically again, after, like you said, when you go through a certain um traumatic experience, or something that really moves you, or grief, profound grief, let's say, um I figured that my desire to be an artist versus my desire to live a creative life, like, you know I really have this very strong thing in my gut, like, I really have and must live a creative life more and beyond anything else I want to be. So it's just not the profession, the career, what I put out, but everything, how I wake up, how, mm, the yoga I do, the dance I pick, it's just everyday life. Because when I go, I don't want to be remembered. I also, I see, hear, where so many conversations that happen today, where we are continually speaking about impact, changing the world, where all of that, it does make sense and I do connect. But at the end of the day, at least I think it's changed me over the years, where I feel like, if I go away, when I look back, for me, a happy heart or a content would be, did I live a creative life or not? Because that,
Well, that's beautiful because that's transcending the ego on some level, right? It's the ego that is going to think about legacy and fame and, things like that. And true creativity is should not um, be. beholden to the ego, I think. And by the way, I remember the metaphor I was thinking of the other day. And this goes back to the 90s, though, so only 90s kids really get this. So it's sort of like looking at George Michael and his career and the artist he became, and always associating him with Wham! Wake Me Up Before You Go, with the big hair, and he was wearing shorts. But, I mean, that would be doing such a disservice to the artist that he became later. And I mean, I don't put myself at all in the same category as Michael, because I do think he became, again, like a brilliant artist. Uh, but, the experience would be the same. And it's just as frustrating. I feel that I have contributed and said a lot more. But then you see, I mean, I think the world, we have to separate it out as an artist. There's the aspect of popularity and pandering to the gallery, which is what social media is about. And then art is simply about, I feel, being compelled to express something regardless of whether somebody's accepting it or not, or going to see it or not. So these are, again, two opposing forces. They don't always intersect. And that's why probably a lot of the things that I've done later on in life are not going to be seen on a mass level, and that doesn't bother me at all. It's just that I don't necessarily want to be called the Afrin girl for the rest of my life.
But like you said, this is another common myth, and I think a lot of something that artists do struggle with a lot. The downside and the upside of being okay. Yeah, we've spoken about your journey being a writer, actor, but now what you're doing is even more exciting.
Mhm.
Specifically in the world of art, and the platform that you're building and called the Upside Space. Can you talk a little bit about what brought you here? What is your intention? What's really happening? It's really interesting to see. I'd really love to, learn more about it.
Sure. Well, the Upside Space, first of all, is a curated digital art platform. And we are definitely bridging between traditional arts and digital art, including NFTs. We focus only on art from Southeast Asia, South Asia, and the Middle East. I'm the
Yeah.
co-founder of the
Yes.
platform. My other co-founder, Aisha Khan, is
Aisha
based
Khan.
in Singapore, and
Yeah.
she's the one who actually brought the concept to me.
Okay.
Um, as I mentioned before, I've always been art adjacent.
Yes.
Um, I've always, wherever I've lived in Hong Kong, I used to go to Art Basel. Here in Dubai, Art Dubai. I love going to all the art fairs in India. So it's always been a passion, and I wasn't sure in the beginning. To
Okay.
be honest, it was my husband who convinced me. He said, first of all, as a creative, you have to be open-minded. You
Okay.
don't think like everyone else, even though this is the new frontier, and we're talking about NFTs, and again, a growing digital movement when it comes to the
Yes.
traditional arts.
Right.
He said, first do your research and be open. See if there are actual, legacy problems within the art world that might be addressed by this new technology. And it was very true because he's heard me over the years grumble about a few issues that are within the traditional art world that many
Yeah.
of us are familiar with, whether it's
Right.
gatekeeping, the lack of access to artists by
Absolutely.
collectors, kind of the whiff of elitism, et cetera, et cetera. So this is definitely represents a kind of great democratization of art, but at the same time can be a great enabler for each individual artist to be able to, generate an income on their own, to take control of their own narrative in the same way that I wrote my book because it was really important for me to take control of my narrative. So you're telling your own story. And even for us, storytelling is very, very important. That's why we chose to partner with renowned curators. And curators obviously
Absolutely.
can perform many different forms, not only traditional art curators. So we have some traditional art curators that are amazing. A curator can be anyone with a point of view, to be honest, a musician,
Absolutely.
designer, yourself as well, Charuka, I'd be really interested in seeing what somebody brings to the table in terms of curation. Plus,
Absolutely.
with this digital movement, we have a possibility of improving access to art movements, like in places like Bhutan or Laos,
Yeah,
or places where collectors would not traditionally look, or they don't necessarily have the access to. So we're very proud of
absolutely.
what we did. I invite people onto the platform, at no obligation, but I like seeing our platform as a place of discourse and discovery. And we've been
Yes.
getting wonderful feedback. We were actually at Art Dubai 1 year ago today. We participated in Mumbai Gallery Weekend. We were
Yes, I
at
saw that.
art fair, and the response has been wonderful and overwhelming. Now, having said that, I will be very frank as a co-founder and say that in general the market has been slow,
Yeah,
and I think we're a little bit ahead of the curve, and there's so much
yeah,
of explaining that we need to do. Although we have found patrons and collectors, and we're very happy about that. But take the commercial aspect out of it.
out of it.
Come to the Upside Space to be dazzled by the art and the stories that we're sharing. And ultimately,
I
that's
love
what it's
that.
about. And we're seeing a movement even in India where there's a lot of archiving going on, also of traditional
Right.
art, where you
Right.
have maps, right? Out of Bangalore, that's also
Yes.
going digital. And we need to do that in order to be able to attract a new demographic, and to also sustain our practices and be able to present them and archive them for future
Yeah.
generations.
Yeah.
This also makes it much easier to be able to collect the art. And in some cases, what we do is we include the physical piece for free when you purchase the digital piece of art. So it's been a huge, steep learning curve. I've really enjoyed every aspect of it.
Okay.
I'm the creative side of it in terms of, from
What does your day-to-day
website.
role look
I
like?
don't pretend to get involved with, the actual commercial side or the tech
Yeah.
side. That's my co-founder Aisha, and
Okay.
we work with an incredible curatorial lead, Natasha
N-
Jayasingh, who has,
Natasha Destin, yeah. She does
yeah,
wonderful work.
deep knowledge in India, and a lot of integrity and a very similar point of view. And we also have Rafi out of Singapore.
Yeah.
Um, so, huge learning curve, as I said, and I really enjoyed conceptualizing and putting together the Upside Space. And again,
I
as I
love
said, it's
that.
always been, I guess, one of my heart's desire to be able to put together a gallery, and it just so happens that this gallery is a digital gallery.
Yeah. You know what's exciting? I think you've rightly said it. At the time that where we're sitting right now, it's just crystallizing, like you said, in the 90s, where the fashion and the entertainment that was crystallizing. I think we're sitting in a point where we're all anticipating how this is going to turn out, the whole digital world. And
Yeah.
what's even more exciting, I feel like India being in the Southeast Asian belt, I think is even more exciting at where we are because see, the craftsmanship of India and the work that we see in Bhutan, the entire belt is getting the well-deserved recognition that that should have for all these years. But if you see, it's not only in the Southeast Asia, but we're going global and very much global, where people truly understand and admire the heritage that we have. And I just when I look at these projects and I feel like it's just not the contemporary art, but also how the contemporary art can bring the heritage back and take it forward, and
Mhm.
making sure that we're carrying our culture and putting the right eyes on it, and also
And
making sure. Yeah,
at the same time reimagining and
right,
reinventing
exactly.
modes of expression. And that's been very satisfying. We had a wonderful exhibition called In Search of the Devi for
Yeah. Oh,
Club,
wow. I
and it is
love that
fabulous.
idea.
Please see
I
it.
saw
It
one
was,
of the work on the website, actually. I did.
yeah, please see that particular exhibition. It's one of my personal favorites, curated by Sri Moy Bhattacharya, who's actually,
Actually.
she runs an incredible PR and marketing firm, but has also been a collector for many years, has exquisite taste. And she found, a lot of traditional artists, whether it's Patachitra, whether it's also the the ones, sorry, I can't remember, it's just escaping me the name, but all these traditional modes of expression.
Traditional crafts, yeah.
And
Kalamkari.
please see what we've managed to create in that
No,
exhibition.
I highly recommend, and we'll make sure that we're adding it. All the links are being added in the show notes of of the website, so you make sure you do go to Upside Space so that you can check the exhibits. Okay, any last parting words, Lisa, you want to share with us before we wind this up? Because there are a lot of aspiring artists, young girls, also mature girls, but also I think what's unique about the middle age, where a lot of our listeners come from, let's say 20 late 20s to early 30s and 40s, where I think you shed the layer that you were, when you're young enough, there's a lot of validation you're looking for. And but also in the middle, you're still confused. Do you know that the voice you had before isn't the true voice, and you're starting to rediscover who you are, but you still have a long way to go. So, do you have any of your wise words to share with us before we wind this?
I think you put it beautifully. To be honest, I'm somewhat allergic to sort of these aphorisms. Maybe because on social media we keep seeing these one or two
Yeah,
liners.
too many biases.
Wow, that's amazing. I honestly think keep exploring, never stop exploring, and by that I mean the world and who you are. There's no expiry date for exploring as an artist and as a human being, and everybody is creative. I don't care what
Yeah,
you do to earn your money. But again, I think that living day to day is a creative act, and embrace that and be proud of that and never stop exploring.
amazing. Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
It is truly an honor to talk to you. Thank you
No,
so
thank
much for so
you. I really
vulnerably sharing your
enjoyed it.
journey.
All the best to you as well.
Thank you so much. Any last, do you want to add any links for us for people to redirect? Where can they find you? Upside Scale. We'll make sure we link
Yeah, yeah.
all the projects where duly needed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
I
so
just
much.
need
Have a
one moment from me. I
okay.
just need one moment.